A lot has happened since we last spoke,
Yes.
probably, I'd say roughly about a year ago. And I was with you on election night. You had me over at the Daily
Yeah, it's
Wire
fun.
studios, and we had a great time, and we had some beers. You were eating a lot of M&Ms.
Oh, yeah.
And
Got to keep that sugar intake up.
now, the thing that I found most interesting was that you did not like Hillary.
Right.
Is that fair to say? Did I
Yeah, no, I think she's awful.
do not like Hillary Clinton. Clearly do not like Donald Trump.
Right.
So far I'm good?
No, you're right on the money. Thus
So
far.
watching you throughout that evening, the roller coaster of emotions that you were going through, going from when I sat down, when it still looked good for Hillary, to then it's starting to look like Trump, then realizing it was inevitable, but before they called it and everything else. I mean, you went through every emotion known to man.
Bizarro world. Yeah, it was definitely weird because, I was, as you know, I was sort of rooting for both of them to get left adrift in a rowboat somewhere. But unfortunately, one of them was going to be president of the United States. So there was a lot of up and down going on, meaning that I was overjoyed that Hillary was not president of the United States. Anything that kept Hillary out of the White House, I was very happy about. And then I looked at who was actually entering the White House, and I went, well, this I have some trepidation about. I'm not sold on this whole Trump thing, because I hadn't been. I didn't end up voting for either of them.
Yeah.
I left the top of the ticket blank. Neither of them fulfilled my basic requirements to be president of the United States. So now, I was wrong about where I thought Trump would be. I thought Trump was going to lose, just like everybody else was looking at the polls, from Nate Silver to Larry Sabato. And I was clearly 100% wrong on that. So now I just hope that I'm wrong about him as a person and a president.
Yeah.
Because if I'm right, then it's going to be a long 4 years.
I have a feeling that no matter what happens, it's going to be a long period.
For sure.
Yeah, whether he does good stuff and people come along for the ride, or whether he does bad stuff and they don't.
But at least if he does good stuff, then I can feel good about it, right? Like, I'm hoping that he does some good stuff.
Yeah. But at this point, you have to, right? Even if you don't like any of the positions he's taken or the moral center that seems to be all over the place, you do root for him as the president.
Well, so I root for him to do good things. I don't like the phrase, people use this with Obama also, root for him. I don't root for Trump. I don't root for Obama. I didn't root for Hillary. It's not a team sport. I like the White Sox and the Bears and the Celtics. I root for them. I would like to see them win. But in politics, it's not just about winning. It's about what you do to win. It's about the policies that you implement that constitute winning. Like, how do you actually gauge winning? So for me, when Trump makes a bad deal that's good for him politically, that's not something I'm in favor of, right? I'm not rooting for him, even though it helps him politically. I'm rooting for him to do good things. So I'm rooting for me, right? I'm rooting for the country. I'm rooting for him to do the things that'll help the country, more than me, because I'm fine, but that'll help the country. But what I fear is that I think people are rooting for him or rooting against him. And if that's I said this on my podcast today, if your moral center is basically good for Trump is good for the country, or bad for Trump is good for the country, you need a different moral center.
Right. So that seems to be the place that we're at right now, where Trump said, I'm going to win, I'm a winner. And that force of will was almost enough in and of itself to make him a winner. So is your version of winning, which would be having certain a moral code and an ethical code, whatever, whether we agree on every little policy is irrelevant.
Right.
But can you win on that anymore? Now that we've seen how Trump won, do you honestly think that a conservative can win playing the game that's out there?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that. I think that some of the things that Trump did, and I said this very early on, I mean, very early, before he started kind of making an ass of himself repeatedly, I said that actually there was a good shot that he would be a better nominee in terms of winning than Marco Rubio, because I thought that he spoke a moral language about politics a lot of the other candidates did. I mean, you can go look back at my speech that I gave at University of Missouri in like October 2015, and I said that Trump might be stronger, especially among blue-collar whites in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. So I got it right then. I got it wrong a year later, right? But the idea there is that Trump speaks in terms of morality. There are good guys and bad guys, right? Whether you agree with his morality is another thing. But for him, all politics breaks down into good guys versus bad guys. Unfortunately, very often it's just I'm the good guy. Everybody who opposes me is the bad guy. But that's a way that people think about politics. And I think that if you had the actual proper moral, content to that sort of narrative, then yeah, you could still win based on that. It's so funny that because everybody's a binary thinker, everybody broke it down into Trump is the only one who can campaign aggressively. He's the only one who can speak this moral language. No, I wasn't against Trump campaigning aggressively or speaking this moral language. I just thought that he was applying it incorrectly. I mean, if you watch me in debate, I'm constantly applying moral language. I'm constantly aggressive, but I disagreed with Trump. You can do both at the same time.
Yeah. So are we at a point then of post-truth? Because if you look at what he says, now again, most of the criticism I get right now is that I'm being too kind to him. I've been saying for weeks now, we have to see what happens. I can't get outraged about appointments yet. I have to wait to see. You know,
Right.
you can get a sense of what's going on.
No, that's right. I'm not.
But let's see what happens. But
I think that's right. I'm not outraged about the appointments. What he does and what he says, I can be outraged by, and I think that there's an incentive structure that has to exist, or if he does something bad now I criticize him. The argument was made during the election cycle for people on the right, well, if he says something bad, shh, be quiet, Hillary might get elected, right? And my view was, that's not my job. My job is to, as somebody who actually believes in something that's truthful, my job is to say what I think is true, whether he's saying it or not. But now, especially post-election, Hillary's no longer in the picture. So the question now is, if he does something that's false, are you going to call that out, even if you're politically on his side overall? And that's the real question for me. So my job, is the same as it ever was. When he does something good, I praise him. When he does something bad, I don't.
Yeah, which really is not what many people.
People don't want that. No, people. I mean, it's fine.
Do they not want it? Because I suspect they want it. It's what I'm trying to do. I know it's.
I mean, it hasn't hurt me. You know, I think with most people are refreshed when they hear somebody like you or like me say, "Okay, here's the truth." You know, and I'm putting my own political interests aside, or the interests of the person who's at risk here. Then here's what's true and here's what's not. But there's a large contingent that's going to resist that in a major way because, it has become such team sport. It has become, well, if you say something bad about Trump, then you're a cuck and you're undermining him. And it's like, well, again, Bill O'Reilly said that about George Will. George Will criticized the carrier deal. And O'Reilly comes out and he says, George Will's just undermining Trump. I said, wait a second, he's not my dictator.
Right, he's
my servant.
leader.
It's not right. It's not the opposite. I'm not his servant. He's my servant. He's a public servant now. I know that he's been in private business his whole life, but he was running for the job of public servant. Now it's his job to serve the interests of the American people. It's not my job to service his political interests.
Yeah.
And so, it's been very weird to watch people kind of invert that. And I thought that was unique to the left. So I've been disabused of that pretty radically.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. And maybe my feelings about what's happening with the left just kicked in a little earlier than yours have kicked in about the right.
I think that's true.
Because you are seeing this, and it's pretty obvious. I mean, to me, the issue will be that once these Trump people who have been all for, against political correctness and for free speech and all of this stuff, and say what you feel, and blah, blah, which I'm for all of that stuff. Of course, so am I. But once, on January 20th, once those are the guys that are in power, will they be as for fighting the power?
No,
I somehow suspect not.
No, I mean, Kellyanne Conway today, right? I mean, Kellyanne Conway was out there criticizing, I think it was Bret Stephens from the Wall Street Journal. Bret Stephens from the Wall Street Journal was making fun of Carly Fiorina because she went to Trump Tower. And he says, 5 minutes ago, you were saying he was the worst person who ever was, and he was making fun of your face, and now here you are at Trump Tower. And Kellyanne Conway tweets back at Bret Stephens, and she says something like, that's really sexist. What do you think? And then she tags Rupert Murdoch, right, who owns the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
And so is this the way that this is going to go now, that we're going to go